Welcome everyone back to Vivid Earth. I'm thrilled to have today Dr. Jan Halper-Hayes. She's such a unique voice in the truth-speaking and global political scene. And I'm thrilled to finally have her on. As you know, we have been seeking and uncovering the truth as we go along. She is one of the women that I greatly respect in this movement. I'm sure I can't do justice to her bias. I'm going to ask Dr. Jan to quickly introduce herself and give us an overview of who she is and a little bit of background.
Oh, I haven't done this for a while. Okay. A lot of people want to know, how did I end up on the Department of Defense Task Force? I have 35 years of consulting. My specialty in the later years was mergers and acquisitions, but it had to do with change and bringing cultures together. So at that point, when I first went on the task force, it was looking at the culture, not only of the Department of Defense, but within our government. And then after 2020, it slowly switched. And there was concern about whether people were waking up or not, how they were responding to things. And I became a psychologist because my father almost died and I went for therapy. And the woman said to me, you know, you're a natural born shrink. And I ran out of the office. I said, I've been goal-oriented all my life. I was still in my 20s, but, you know, we think that we've lived so long at that point. But it was the best advice that I had got. So I went back to school and had the great fortune of studying under many of the names of the 80s, the human potential movement. And that has had a great influence on me. And I've always been a consultant. I was warned against going into private practice because my mentor said to me, you will go crazy from 6 in the morning or 8 in the morning till 10 at night, one-on-one with people, because I actually got frustrated with people that weren't changing. He said, you need to work with business people. So we always get the right messages and the right steering. And I feel very grateful that that has been able to happen. I mean, I've been CEO of a streaming media company that was sold to Sony. So I've just had a variety of experiences. I just call myself a project person. You know, I like getting things to happen the right way at the right time. And that's what I'm trying to do now.
Wonderful. Well, you're certainly contributing to the movement of truth and awakening in a really big way. I know that you interviewed on BBC and the likes very often. You live in the UK, although you're American, as I understand. And yeah, I first discovered you, gosh, I don't know, must be maybe 18 months ago. And I just thought you were such a sober voice in the movement of awakening, because there was a lot of doubt, there was a lot of misinformation, disinformation, and you know, you will understand coming from a psychology background that there's all these different audiences that you're trying to reach, and they all understand things in a different way, and they resonate and relate to different people. They don't all relate to the same people. They need a different voice. They need a different way of bringing the story and the message across. And I feel like you are really speaking to a certain audience that is a professional business audience. I always say I come from a business background. I've met many very important people in my life. And since my own awakening, I really discovered that the people in my circle that was the most educated, the most successful, the smartest, were actually the most brainwashed, unfortunately.
I know. It's very hot here. It's muggy. I'm about to take my jacket off. So there.
Yeah.
Okay.
So,
Thank
so yeah, and I
you.
know
Okay.
that you've been on the Department of Defense Task Force. What is your experience been in getting across what needs to be I also come from a marketing and PR world in my previous life, and
Right.
I know how important it is to kind of look at the algorithms, look at the audience segments, make sure that the message reaches different audience segments. Give us a little bit of insight as to what your job entails there with regards to reading the temperature of the global community, so to speak.
Well, it's changed over time. I mean, the first part was just trying to understand the people that were awake and the people that still aren't awake. I joined an X space the other night, and it was the Krasenstein brothers, the two shills that are Democrat paid to always post, were the hosts of it. And there were a lot of people from the truther movement, but it was amazing to me. There were two things. One person who claimed to be a journalist, when a Republican was trying to talk to him, all he could do was interrupt, interrupt, interrupt. The other thing that these liberals do is that they think they understand us and therefore diagnose us without ever listening to us. And they have so bought into the lies from the mainstream media and then accuse us of lying because we think differently. And so I had pointed out that I had been listening for quite some time, and it really seemed like it was a schoolyard fight between people instead of people listening. And then I said, well, look, if you had all the conservatives in Disney World and all the liberals, the conservatives would be found on Main Street, Frontierland, and Adventureland. To find the liberals, you have to go to Fantasyland and Tomorrowland. Well, they did not have a sense of humor. How dare you say all? And I mean, and they have no self-awareness. I mean, I've said this, but I had the experience of it. And I stayed on to that squabbling for almost an hour.
Wow.
And I just, it was unbelievable. And then after I gave my Disney World analogy or metaphor, one of the Krasenstein said, well, you were just telling us that we shouldn't judge people and you just judged. And I said, you guys just don't have a sense of humor, do you? You can't laugh at yourselves. You just take yourself too seriously. And there are different issues. The Anons think that they own all the truth. There is a bit of an arrogance that goes on.
Yeah.
And they think because they've been around longer that no one else has a right to speak. They learn the stuff, but no, they don't have a right to really share it. So, and that one of the things that I know is that when there's a people's movement and it gets closer and closer to success, the squabbling heightens. And so right now I've been looking at that. I did take the first couple of months of this year. I was asked to do an analysis on Congress and why it doesn't work, and to look at what their quote unquote standards of performance are. They only live for themselves and getting reelected. I mean, we've known it, but I wrote out the evidence of it. When freshman Congress, newly elected congressmen or Congress people, however someone wants to deal with that, go to their orientation, it's 8 days long. But the 8 days is because there are companies sponsoring events, In other words, they're given the education of how business is done, not at the Capitol, but how business is done offline. And the first thing is, do not recommend any changes to what we are doing, because it hurts not we the people, but it hurts us in getting reelected. And so that was very insightful, because I was actually able to give evidence that they're working on their behalf and not our behalf.
Yeah. It's become so toxic, you know. It's almost like, I love this analogy. You add an event, and suddenly the waiters take over and they think that they're in charge, and they take over the entire event, and it's all about them. And this is kind of what we have here. You know, these are the people that are supposed to work for us and make the country run, but it's all about them pleasing the corporate sponsors behind them and making sure they follow orders. You know, it's quite sad.
Yeah.
But do you think it can be fixed? That is the question.
Well, do I think it can be fixed? Maybe. It's a big maybe. I mean, one thing is, living here in the UK, politicians or candidates cannot start campaigning until 6 months before. Well, of course, we just had, you know, a sprung election, but normally. And you can't spend more than £50,000. Now, Citizens United was a case that opened up the door for people to give as much money as they wanted. And they created a 501c4, which means you don't have to identify who gave that money.
Yeah.
But one of the things that has happened with the America First movement is that the donors don't have that kind of power. They obviously still have the power with the Democrats, as has just been proven. And Kamala has now succeeded in gaining enough delegates for the nomination. Obama wasn't going to support her or endorse her. He wanted an open convention, but the latest is, you know, he's going to give in too. But people forget, she couldn't even get votes in the primary, and she dropped out. She was the first that dropped out. No one liked her. But I think that the Democrats were in such shock from realizing they'd been lied to about Biden's condition that they're so happy. And she's not really a Black woman, but they've made her a Black woman and a woman. And so they're just so excited about this. But I'm waiting for more of the truths to come out, because the vetting has to go on.
Well, that was going to be my next question. I mean, doesn't this kind of push her out into the limelight, and people are going to be investigating every aspect of her and, you know, nitpicking every part of her narrative, her history, and all of that? Those things are going to come out, and it actually needs to, right?
Oh, absolutely. And the Democrats are so they have this fantasy that is going to keep going. I need to excuse myself. I'm really
hear him, but if you
I'm really sorry.
Yeah, so Dr. Jan Halper-Hayes is a very important figure in this movement, especially looking at the psychology behind, you know, what happens, like reading the room, but on a macro scale in terms of the world.
They would have continued to ring my bell. I'm terribly sorry about that.
Oh, was that your bell? I thought maybe that was your dog.
You know, thanks. So the Democrat interpretation of this is that we had the RNC convention and we focused on Joe. No, we focused on what this administration has been doing and done but they think, oh, Joe was so smart, and now everything that the Republicans did with their convention and all their vetting and whatever, and can you just leave it? I'm so sorry.
That happens as we broadcast these things, often from our home and on the run. And I would love to hear
again. Oh, that's terrible. Amazon. And he would have kept knocking. So again, to your audience, I apologize.
Not
for
a
that.
problem.
And so they think that Biden crafted this whole thing. No, the truth is that Biden was not going to step down as the nominee. And what they did was they threatened him with the 25th Amendment if he didn't step down and pass the baton to Kamala. So there's so much that will come out. And how can she say I was the border czar? How can she? She can't. I mean, what does she have to stand on?
She hasn't even been to the border. Never mind.
No.
Else.
And she did that interview with NBC, and her response was, well, I haven't been to Europe either. And it's, you know, and her cackling is going to come out. I mean, it's just always there. But so it's going to be very interesting to see. And they think that Kamala is just going to knock Donald Trump off his pedestal. It's like they don't get him. He already knew this was going to happen.
Yeah, I'm sure it's all been mapped out. All of the potential futures have already been worked out and mapped out.
Absolutely. I mean, you know, it's game theory. And with game theory, you know, one action brings a certain reaction. It might not be the one that game theory came up with, but then it just means you put it back in and you figure out what your next move is. And hopefully Joe will make it all the way to the end of his term, or else Trump is going to be 45 and 48, because then they're going to have to put Kamala in. But here's the other thing. If they put Kamala in, the next person in line is the Speaker of the House.
I believe
a Republican. And if they didn't accept him and they wanted to put their own person in, Congress has to approve. And at least we still have the majority by 3 seats.
Yeah. And I believe she's what is called an anchor baby as well. So she might not even qualify.
Well, you know, there have been different things about that. I mean, that's a really good point that you bring up, because on one hand, the argument is her parents were students living in student housing. That did not qualify them as residents. But there's the other side, which is, as you said, anchor baby. If you're born in the States, you're a US citizen. And I don't think that, well, I don't know. You know, I was going to say, I don't think that they'll go in that direction, but you never know. And the surprises that might come, but it sure is going to be interesting. I was hoping for an open convention. I would have liked to have seen that with the Democrats. You know, the last time they had one was 1980 between Carter and Ted Kennedy. And in 1924, it took 103 ballots before they selected a candidate. So I was hoping for that moment in history and not a shoe-in of her.
For sure. And I mean, if we think about what happened just 10 days ago with the Trump assassination, what are you seeing in the aftermath of all of that happening?
Well, a lot of people have changed their opinion of him. I mean, the fact that, and of course, the first thing that the Democrats were, this was all staged. but I can tell you that when Trump came up from the Secret Service and the anger on his face, he did not know this was going to happen.
Yeah.
I mean, if people don't believe in divine intervention, if people don't believe, one, God allowed this to happen, and also God intervened. I mean, because he turned his head at the right moment.
Yes.
I mean, you can't time that in anything.
Yeah, I was going to say, how can you fake that? There's no way. It's too close. You can never fake that.
And if you look at what people have posted with the bullseye and where it would have got him if he hadn't turned his head, you know, one of the things that makes me very, very angry about it is that first off, the reason that the mainstream media was there was they thought he was going to announce his vice president. So they wanted to be there for that reason. Yeah,
because it was kind of strange that they were, for the first time, actually broadcasting his rally.
Exactly. And it would have been tragic for everyone around the world to have seen his head blown off. That's what could have happened. And it shook me up for days. And I know that people, even though we're so grateful it didn't happen, of course, our mind went to the worst if it had happened. And where would we be as a country? We'd be over. We'd be over. The Democrats would continue to destroy. We'd have
there would be no hope.
Central bank, digital currency. We'd be like China.
Yeah, for sure. So where does all of this leave the US right now, where it's going in the next 5 months towards what is supposed to be an election, which I think many of us are feeling there may not be an election, at least not when it's supposed to be. What are your thoughts?
Well, one, there has to be an election. And the reason there has to be an election is that Trump needs to show the public the support that he has. Even if it comes out from the Supreme Court that this was a fraudulent election, Trump could have presented all of that because the military has always had the goods on it. But when you see how volatile the other side is, there has always been a fear of a civil war. And I think one of the things that shocked people was how calm the audience was when that bullet went whizzing by and he went down. And that is the difference between conservatives and liberals. I mean, more people were concerned about him than themselves. And sadly, 2 people were injured and 1 man lost his life. His family has just been as gracious about the whole thing as could be. Their father jumped on them to protect them, and he jumped on his wife. You know, he gave his life for something important. And for Trump to have had his fireman's uniform on stage when he gave his speech at the convention was a very, very touching moment. And I think that what it's done is it's really mellowed Trump.
Yeah.
I mean, how could it not? I mean, that is such a shock. And then we're glad that the director of the Secret Service resigned. I mean, after the congressional hearing where she wouldn't answer a thing, but
that was shocking.
Republicans and Democrats were just tearing her apart because any politician should be afraid. The Secret Service did not necessarily do their job. They were trying to blame Butler, PA, saying that they were responsible for that route. I have one simple question. Why weren't drones flying around? Because there were trees there. Why weren't they doing that? Yeah. So
Also, she was not, let's say, capable of that role. I mean, I believe she came from a corporate job as well. She worked for PepsiCo.
she did. But she also had been in politics during the Dick Cheney era.
Okay.
I honestly did not want to research background, so I don't know what roles she had. I happen to have seen a picture of her with Dick Cheney when she was looking a bit younger. That's all I need to know.
Yeah, exactly. Hmm.
I mean, it's shocking to me the way Lynn Cheney and Adam Kinzinger are supporting Biden, how they've gone against the Republican Party. Um, I don't understand it. I really, really don't, unless why they have such hatred for Donald Trump. Because if anyone should be afraid, those two should be afraid because they've been traitors. Are they going to end up in Gitmo as well?
Yeah.
Or maybe she's trying to protect her father from having to go to Gitmo. Who knows?
Indeed. Dr. Jan, if you can if you have some sort of very eminent, hot intel that you could share with us, people
I
are
actually,
obviously in
I don't.
anticipation.
I haven't been cleared to say anything else.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah. I wish I could, because I think everyone needs another boost, but no.
What are your feelings about the next couple of months? Is it going to be crazy, chaotic? Is it, a lot of people speak about a big event that we're still going to see, whether it's a sky event, whether it's a nuclear scare, whether it's an earth event. What are your thoughts? What should specifically Americans be prepared for in the next couple of months without putting any fear porn out there, because I'm not about fear porn.
Right. Well, we have been warned that things would continue to get worse before they would get better. So I say it's going to keep on going the way it's going to be going and the way it has been. But see, I know Q says, watch the movie, but I say, we are not living through a movie. This is a spiritual war and we are being attacked psychologically. And that is really important to understand. And it's not only an attack or an exposure of how the Democrats run things, because if Trump hadn't continued on this was a fraudulent election, Republicans wouldn't have gotten off their duffs. The fact is, we needed to be woken up as well, because we were sitting around thinking that our politicians were working on our behalf, that they were actually doing things to make our country better. But it really is, I think the fight is going to escalate between trying to destroy America and America first. That will just continue. I'm sure there will be surprises, but we don't know what those surprises will be. And I don't think, the one thing I know is that no one could tell you what the next surprise will be, because things have to be carried out and decisions are made on the spot, because we are in a war.
Yeah.
And so you don't decide, this is my whole strategy and not change.
Yeah.
You have to look at the different things that are going on and figure out how you're going to deal with them, sometimes on a moment by moment basis.
Yeah. And you all,
I just say, stay positive, know that God is in control, and that we have to focus on ourselves to keep ourselves centered, our equilibrium. It's okay to go a little bit out of balance, but we cannot let outside things stop us. And the more awareness we have of ourselves, the better we are at understanding other people, what's being said, what's going on.
Yeah. You know, it's all about controlling what you can, which is only really your own response to things and your own internal world. You can't control what's going to happen in the spiritual war next, you know.
You're absolutely right. But people think, and so much of the conversation right after Trump was shot was analysis of the bullet. And it was like, I understand that you want an understanding of it, but we've been lied to in so many other ways. Why are you wasting your time hoping that you're going to be told what really went on? The best that we can do is trust our intuition of this doesn't make sense. So we do have questions. We have very valid questions. We have every right to be suspicious about why things fell through the cracks. In the end, he's still alive. He's still fighting. And that is what I thank God for every single day.
Yeah.
I think we would have had a depression, and I don't mean financial, I mean a psychological depression and hopelessness if they had succeeded.
Yeah, for sure.
And Trump always says, they're not after me, they're after you.
Yeah.
And that was not just to get him out because they're so afraid of him. It was to violently upset us.
Yeah. Yeah. Gosh, it's quite something, because we know this is a very big military operation, but of course Trump is the face of that, and he has been instrumental in many aspects of this operation. So it would have, I mean, it would have been devastating to lose him as that figurehead, because who do people then pin their hopes? They, you know, who do they look for guidance? Like,
exactly,
is not anyone else really.
Because there has not been such a strong voice. And I don't know if your viewers are aware of this, but the military recruited Trump to run for president.
Yeah.
And they wanted to get rid of Obama, and there was going to be a military coup. Once they convinced Trump, then they knew, and they've been working on this plan for a long time. This is not just the past 8 or 9 years since Trump came on the scene, and it's not since Kennedy. I call Kennedy the starter, and Trump is going to be the finisher. But it started well before this, because you can go all the way back to 1066, when the city of London became their own state, their own sovereignty that William the Conqueror gave to them, and how over the years they continued to control trade and finance. And then our fiat currencies, we can just go on with looking at, and then credit cards. I remember when I first got a credit card, and it was like maybe 8% or 10% of interest that you'd have to pay, which is pretty steep. And then 23 years ago, I came to the UK, and there were credit cards with 23 to 36%. I mean, how can you even, how could the politicians here allow that to pass?
Yeah.
Because we were also brainwashed to live off of credit.
Yeah. The more dependent people became on credit cards, the more they just incrementally, you know, it's
right.
Like, you don't see the prison being built around you. You know, one day when you look up, it's like, oh dear, I'm in a prison cell. You know.
And then what did they start doing? They ran a promotion. Oh, switch your debt over to me, and for 12 months you won't have to pay or something. Oh, great. So that means for 12 months the interest is still accruing, and people don't think about that. They think, oh, good, I can get away from this one and go to the next one and say, we're all in cahoots.
Yeah. Debt slavery is one of their biggest strategies within this global spiritual war, multi-century war, really. It's been building up for a
Absolutely.
long time.
Yes, absolutely. And I really hope that people take that in, because this is not new. And the reason that they don't hate Trump, they are afraid of Trump.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's some people, oh, his mean tweets, whatever. Oh, give me a break. You know, give me a break.
That person needs to see what real evil looks like. We know what
Oh,
real evil looks like, right?
oh,
And they haven't even seen
absolutely.
any of that.
And it's before them. It's right in front of their face, and they don't see it. I mean, I'm guilty of that, because I have a very good friend of well over 40 years, and I have so much respect for her. And I cannot tell you how many years she said to me, but they're evil. And I was like, oh, no, they can't be evil.
Mm.
And I wish I could go back in time to figure out what opened my eyes to that. But one day I realized these are evil intentions. This
Yeah.
is not political ideology. They have evil intentions when you look at all the things they've done over the decades to destroy the family, to put in the women's movement so that they then can destroy men, accusing them of masculine toxicity. I mean, everything has its component, and it all adds up. And with this whole trans movement, then I just saw a great video that someone forwarded to me. I don't even know who the speaker was, but she made a very good point, because if somebody in an organization says, I have a trans child, that ends up poisoning the whole organization, because you can't talk about that anymore.
Mm.
And what they've been able to do is have the lowest common denominator disrupt the largest systems.
Yeah. And that, as we know, it's a Marxist agenda, but we kind of know it started way before that as well. And that's just one of their playbooks. There are so many. And, we're not even talking about the personal habits of some of these politicians, the satanic lives, really, that they're living, the evil that they personally have committed, which I know many of us are looking forward to that being disclosed to the public.
Exactly. Well, I'm going to the border in Texas this weekend, and Lloyd Brunson is going to be there, and I saw him in early June in Cape Canaveral, and he was throwing his hands up. He didn't understand. I don't know if anything's progressed, but we still have Clarence Thomas, who solely can make a decision about the fraudulent case that has been brought forth out of Florida. So when you ask me, what do I anticipate over the next 5 months? I anticipate the things that we have questions about will slowly be answered. It's just in God's time and not in our time.
Yeah. It's all about divine timing. And I believe that case kind of waited for the right timing it's all about timing, as you know. All of these events happening in a certain time sequence, and they support one another to really contribute to this awakening process, because the masses have been brainwashed literally for centuries, and it's a very carefully crafted strategy that led to them being the way they are today. So it's important to kind of get the timing right of these things. They're like little stepping stones, the one leads to the next and the next, and the one builds on the other. So yeah, I believe in divine timing, and I personally feel like we're going to get a lot of disclosure in the next 5 months, and It's going
You're
to be
right.
great. It's going to be a great time for patriots because, you know, we've been crying wolf for so many times. It's going to happen. You know, this is going to happen. And people are like, what? You said that was going to happen and it didn't. Well, I think the moment is here where an avalanche of disclosure is going to be coming out. I wanted to ask you about what, and I know there's certain things that you can't say, but in terms of the financial markets and what we're going to be seeing with the dollar, any thoughts you can share with that? With
You
regards
know,
to
I stay out of that because I'm not an expert. And I'm very careful about what I say because I want it to be able to be substantiated as well. I'm hoping for the revaluation as well. And this is actually a great example for people to understand why things take so long. So, as we know, the Iraqi dinar is going to go on the Forex market. Then they had developed a document, they sent it to a committee, and the committee changed everything. So the final deciders are now having to rewrite it and get rid of those changes. So there are always people who would want to put a spanner into it. And it's not putting their stamp on it. It actually is, maybe they think a little differently, but they changed the timing, they changed some of the regulations, but they didn't have the authority to do that. And yet they did it. And so that is a tiny example of what goes on every single day. And that is what is going on behind the scenes. So that is why this is dragging out. And Donald Trump has been very upfront. You know, once he gets in, he said it's still going to take 4 to 5 years to get get everything right. I mean, and that I know from all the change management, and every time I have worked on a merger or acquisition, excuse me, in the first stages, once people see that this change is going to happen, they either leave or they join. And I don't think our government people will leave, but they might be asked to leave because we've got to clean up our government.
But what it looks like is they're sort of at mid-level now, because we know about Gitmo. We know certain players have been removed quite early on in the game because there were certain, shall we call them kingpins, that had to be removed. And would you agree that we're at sort of mid-level now, looking at that mid-level or mid-management, if you had to put it in a corporate sense, to kind of test that mid-management to see, have they been complicit? Are they aware of what's actually going on here? Have they contributed to certain nefarious activities? Or are they truly innocent that they just really don't know? They're just carrying out instructions.
There are always those who don't know and carry out instructions. But originally, there were close to 250,000 sealed indictments.
Yeah.
It has grown over 400,000 because the ones that got indicted gave other people up. And that is how it is going down. And I had hoped that the midterms for 2022 would expose things. And I really had my hope. When it didn't happen, I went into a hopium depression for a while. I had to straighten myself out over that one. And eventually I was told that the plan was they needed to get all the way down to the counties to figure out who the crooked people were. So when you think about how many years, how embedded the evilness and the corruption is in the system, then the good thing the Supreme Court just did, they're calling it the Chevron case, which basically has taken the power away from the agency people to interpret the laws, that only Congress can do that. That is a sign that things are moving forward.
Yeah.
Of course, Schumer's already trying to raise some way that it's going to invalidate that, but why have a Supreme Court make a ruling?
And also those agencies are unelected. Who elected them to make decisions for the public on those matters? Nobody. So there's kind of a loophole as well, bringing that in to make decisions and actually having corporates behind them making. So it just suppressed any technology, any innovation that was going to threaten the corporate agenda, you know?
Absolutely. I'm hoping at some point Fauci is fully exposed.
Yeah.
I don't understand why they don't bring in history of how they've acted in the past to tie it into how they have performed today.
Yeah.
I think that our congressional people, even though most of them are lawyers, they really need to learn how to not only investigate, but get to the truth instead of using it as their showboat.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Or maybe they're waiting for the right timing. You know, that's going to be a big bombshell. Finally, when he does go down in flames, it's you know, it's finally, because you still see so many people around you that they have no idea, and they maintain, you know, this was the best decision, these vaccines were the best, were safe and effective, and they refuse to look at the truth. And kind of people are slowly waking up, but there's a lot of people that are not prepared, you know, cognitive dissonance. They're just not prepared to see it.
No, and YouTube has just come out with a ruling that you can only talk about health-related matters that are approved by the World Health Organization.
Oh dear. Wow.
Yeah. Yeah. You can't talk about remedies or how to detox yourself or anything like that. Yeah. Those doctors they'll get kicked off of YouTube.
Oh. Well, I lost 2 channels on YouTube. The first was about, you know, speaking out about the vaccine, even though I was quite careful, but, you know, one uses code words where you can, but clearly it wasn't enough. So I lost the channel. And the other channel was around the elections, you know, speaking out about the elections. Again, I was pretty careful, but yeah, so many.
How did you see that the election was fraudulent? What made you realize that?
You're talking about 2016, I mean 2020, yeah.
No, 2020.
It was just so obvious, you know, what was really going on. It was obvious that he was the, you know, the candidate of choice. And then, of course, all of the information and intel came out about how fraud was actually committed, you know, at county level, Dominion being so compromised. I mean, why is nobody asking questions about Dominion, where it comes from, what kind of access, backdoor access does it have? I mean, it's ridiculous. It's not even well hidden.
No, you know, there's a film, came out in 2012, The Candidate with Will Ferrell. Well, there is a scene and Will Ferrell is announced as the winner, and his opponent turns to his wife and says, "How did that happen? We were 10 points ahead." And then you see them closing up the voting booth and the machines, and they show a tag that says it's internet connected. They were telling us back then, you know, but they snuck it in, and we didn't know to even take that seriously. We just figured that's the way politics is. And then, of course, Will Ferrell ends up saying that he really wasn't the best candidate and gives it to him, which, you know, is a very nice ending to a comedy. But you know,
They always tell us what they're doing. They
well,
always put it
and
out in front of us.
And what people don't realize, I mean, we've known of the different machines and the fraud that's been going on in different states and counties and cities, et cetera. But one of the reasons Hillary Clinton took so long to come out and admit she lost was because they have been cheating the system, but the military stepped in. They knew what they were doing. They could have stepped into 2020, but we would have had a civil war. Yeah, the realities needed to come out. We've needed to go through this unsettling period of time.
Yeah. And also, you know, they had to catch that middle management. In 2020, it was like there was still a lot of people to round up, because it's like, you know, it's like a rotting ship. If you don't cut out the rot completely, then it's just going to continue to spread, you know, or it's like gangrene on a leg. You leave a little bit behind, you have to remove all of it.
And the rot is like George Soros and his NGOs.
Yeah.
And the rot is all the way down to the county level.
Yeah.
And the rot is within our different governments. And the other thing that I want people to appreciate is that this is an alliance of 200 countries. That means 200 militaries. That means 200 financial systems. You know, this is a major coordination. And honestly, whenever we get to, I call it the start line, because it will be the start of the changes that have been put into place. There's been so much and so many people that needed to get there. And many people have had to sign non-disclosure agreements, NDAs, because they were taken in. There's always an infiltrator here and there. I mean, last September, October, November, that was one of the things my task force was working on, is trying to identify the infiltrators. And there are more, but what happens is when you're crooked, you eventually get caught because you can't keep on building new screens to fool people.
Yeah. I think people don't understand just how big this military operation actually is. As you say, 200 countries working together, you know, to achieve this goal. Now, on that subject, where would you see the rest of the world fare with, you know, America being quite sort of at the precipice, almost, so to speak? What about the rest of the world? I mean, it's been so difficult getting information on South Africa. You know, we can still see the corruption and the fraud and the, you know, it's becoming quite obvious now. So it's kind of, for me, I see it as part of a kind of a show and tell, show the people just how bad it really gets.
Right.
But again, I can't be, you know, I can't be sure that is the case. And I'm just wondering, is this going to be one fully coordinated effort where everything will just suddenly flip? I know that change is going to take a few years, but...
well, the first thing that needs to happen is the revaluation. Because if the financial system isn't in place, then nothing else will be able to work. Yeah. So that's the first thing that needs to happen. I will tell you that I think the UK, the majority are still asleep. I mean, it's shocked me at friends that I have had for years and years who canceled me because I didn't take the vaccine, because I support Trump, whatever. You know, actually, that's turned out to be a great thing for people, because then you're not around these toxic people. But when I first said to one friend that I wasn't going to take the vaccine, she, of course, sent me one article one article, and this confirmed that it will be safe. And then another friend, my doctors gave me hydroxychloroquine and ivermectin. I had actually had a stroke June of 2020, and they said, no way will you take, not that I had planned on it, but thank goodness that there. And so this friend of mine said, but the World Health Organization said that it is not approved. Can I give you all this other information? And then what they do is, oh, that's just a conservative site, you know.
Yeah.
It's kill the messenger because I don't want a different message. And another friend said, well, I took one for the team. Oh, did you research it at all? And then you went and got, and on her Facebook page, her face is encircled with the, I got boosted. Oh, I just, you know, I'm without words right now because I'm still in shock that I had friends that didn't use their brains.
Yeah, and I have family and I still cannot convince them, you know. They don't want to hear it, but I think it's also maybe pride and they just don't want to go there, so they just cut it off. So please don't send me any articles anymore. Or for years I've had to hear, but the CDC, but the FDA. It's like,
right?
Are you kidding me?
You know, Robert Malone, who's the one that one of the medical scientists who invented the mRNA, and if he had not done a FOIA request, Freedom of Information Act request, because Pfizer and the FDA had wanted to seal the documents for 75 years.
Yeah.
Well, that alone, why don't they want to tell the truth? Why do they want that truth kept from the public? And only because of him. And then there was a dump of about 83,000 documents, and Naomi Wolf coordinated the task force for that. And then there was a separate site set up just for the lawyers that volunteered to be able to dig through all of that. And it had to come out. And so whether Malone is feeling guilty for whether he gave them permission to use the mRNA or whatever is behind that, he did us a great service by making sure that the truth was not going to be sealed for 75 years.
Yeah. No, it's absolutely crazy. Yeah, I'm waiting for the day where everyone will know, you know, the truth. Because unfortunately, with so much evidence already out, some people still refuse to see it. So
what do you think could be the next triggers to wake up some of the sleeping people?
Well, with regards to COVID, it would definitely, you know, putting Fauci in jail. And, you know, you just have to look at the revolving door of the FDA and Pfizer and all those organizations, people just moving around like there's nothing wrong. They come from Pfizer straight into the FDA, and sometimes, you know, back to another pharmaceutical company. And, but I think, I don't know, maybe it is a big, shocking worldwide event with mass disclosure. You know, people are still hoping for the EBS. Everything will shut down 24/7, broadcast, just telling people really what the truth is. Or perhaps it's when the actual mainstream, I always say, these people will not believe anything unless they hear it on CNN. Like they literally, they have to hear it on the CNN, otherwise it didn't happen.
Exactly. That's what I think. I think that needs to happen. I think that many people will be ignorant about the revaluation.
Yeah.
So I think that will be a good trigger for us.
Yeah.
And it will help us further some things along. But the media has to change. And once they saw the condition of Joe Biden, I listened to some conversations between journalists from the same network, and the ones that weren't close, that didn't directly report from the White House, if they weren't White House correspondents or they weren't political correspondents, their colleagues were in shock. Their colleagues were asking them, did you know? Did you see this? How did you deal with it? You know, so there are a lot in the media that are ticked off that this truth has been held back. Now, of course, they were living in an echo chamber, so they only heard certain things. But then you have to ask, why are they not more curious? I mean, look, Biden, when he was campaigning in 2020 from his basement, he said, we have put together the best massive fraudulent grassroots campaign. He told us, the media never reported it, never. You know, we all saw it, we all saved it, you know, and we knew that he had dementia back then. It made him slip up, and they so needed COVID. They so needed that. And I think, you know, I'm hearing things floating, oh, you know, maybe there's going to be a bird flu pandemic or what. The people aren't going to respond the same way.
Yeah, they've had
They failed to turn us into serfs.
Yeah.
And too many people woke up. They don't realize that was the best thing they did for us.
Yeah.
Because when we didn't have all sorts of distractions, we had time to think and see and realize.
Yeah. For me, that was the trigger, that something is seriously wrong. And I became obsessed with finding out the truth. You know, any waking minute besides working and sleeping, I was researching. So it actually had the opposite effect to some extent, you know, where it really led to a massive global awakening. And the same with Trump, you know, that failed attempt again led to another big awakening in many, many different communities that were never supporting him before. So, you know, their plans always get foiled and used against them, and it actually helps us. And there's really nothing that can stop what's coming. We just have to, you know, be strong, be resolute, and, you know, face the next couple of months and couple of years. And, you know, we've been preparing for this. We've been getting ready.
We absolutely have. Well, it's just been delightful. I've really enjoyed speaking with you.
It's been
such a lovely, calm manner.
So wonderful to finally have you on, and you're doing absolutely amazing work. And of course, you're a woman in this world dominated by men, which I think is wonderful. And I just want to thank you for your service. And
oh, thank you. Thank you.
All love you so much. So thank you for that. And yeah, I look forward to speaking to you again. Any last thoughts? Where can people find you, or anything you want to share?
They can go to my Substack, which is drjan.substack.com. And there's different articles that I've written about different things that'll help them understand some of what is going on around us. I am on Truth as Real Dr. Jan, and my big one on X is biz_shrink. No numbers after it. I mean, the last time I checked, there were 12 fraudulent accounts. I've reported some. I just reported 2 more that were brought to my attention, and they're still going. But the funniest thing is that they blocked me. Yeah, so that's where people can find me, and I'll look forward to us not taking so much time to get our next one organized, because I'd love to come back.
But I appreciate the time. Thank you so much, and we're all behind you all the way, and look forward to seeing how it all unfolds over the next couple of
Thank
months.
you.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Dr. Jan. Thank you so much. Thanks, everyone.